It's a Monday edition of Husker247 Daily. I'm Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson over there. We're back from central Pennsylvania. We also experienced a Pittsburgh Riverhounds watch party that we didn't know we were walking into, but they beat Tulsa to win the cup. So there's that. And we're gonna chit chat, I guess, a little bit about Nebraska's loss to Penn State. I know Nebraska's coaches and players were quickly moving on from that one, but we're not going to be quite so quick to move on from what we saw at Penn State. I guess now with kind of 24 hours or a little bit more than 24 hours to sift through the wreckage of that one, Brian, give me two things that kind of stand out to you from that one that maybe surprised you a little bit. I mean, I think there was kind of a lot of threads to pull on there, but maybe two things that you saw in that game that you're like, man, I didn't see that coming.
I know the run defense has been questioned all year, and there's been some bad numbers against it, but I was more discouraged than I expected to be by the run defense and the D-line in that game. Just how easy it was for Penn State to really lock in on blocks. Nebraska couldn't get off blocks and then get to the perimeter. And Rule talked about it leading up to the game. Penn State loved to, bounce it out to the perimeter, and Iowa will try to do the same thing, and they'll have patience with it and trust their guys can hold blocks. And it was just frustrating, I think, to watch a Nebraska defense that I felt like for the, most of the game really was just continually either held up in a block or not taking the best angle or tackling well. And they never for one moment got a grip on that game. So that's the first thing. I know they have flaws, but it was more disappointing than I expected it to be. The second thing, it's not like a major concern going forward, but it was like one of the first times I thought Nebraska's special teams lost a game where it was a minus for them. And I do factor in that Ja'Cory had a couple nice kick returns and helped field position. And I think on the first one, if he had bounced it outside from the press box, he might have scored. He kind of took it back into the middle of the field and it didn't work out. But that part was all right. But, you don't expect maybe them to run a fake when they're up 20 points, but they did. And it worked on you. And Mekhi Nelson taking the ball out and getting the ball at your own 10-yard line. And then a punt where you let him return at 26 yards, hit a guy out of bounds. I thought the Penn State guy hit Archie Wilson as much as Archie Wilson hit him, but nonetheless, it was a penalty on Nebraska. So I guess that, Bruntz, I'm not concerned about special teams under Eckler. I just thought, we have to call a spade and say they probably lost that one.
I think the special teams conversation, and I think a little bit of the run defense piece of it as well. Like it just didn't seem like Nebraska was playing with much poise in that game. And I didn't, that we've been to Penn State multiple times. I mean, we've seen that stadium when it's packed. I mentioned this on the 3-minute drill after the game. I mean, that student section there were full sections of it that were empty. Like that, that was not a Penn State atmosphere that it has, been what it's been in the past when Nebraska's played there. And I was just surprised, I guess, by how it just off kilter Nebraska seemed that entire game. And I think that's maybe the biggest concern to me was the fact that it's coming out of a bye week. Like you came out of a bye week and it just didn't seem like you were ready for that one. So that's a big concern. What did you make of Nebraska's kind of offensive game plan in that game? Like it kind of watching it back. First drive looks great. You get a nice run look with Emmett on the long, the 52-yarder. But the rest of the way, it just didn't seem like Nebraska was really able to find its footing, and certainly playing from behind didn't help matters there either.
Yeah, the passing game was disjointed for sure. And it wasn't only TJ, like the receivers, we only put so much stock in it, but they had their lowest PFF grade and stuff like that. I didn't think really any part of that you really felt comfortable with it. TJ Lateef mentioned after the game, like the scramble drill stuff. There were opportunities where actually the pass pro was pretty good for large parts of the game. But there were these moments where he had a little time and you thought maybe he could run for a few more, or whatever decision he made with the throw, it wasn't quite probably with the one he should have made, or he'd want the throw back in some cases. And so I think TJ would probably look at that film and tell you he can play at a higher level than that. My intrigue remains the exact same with him from that game. Like, the thing about it was, and Rule said this in the post game, Penn State didn't just shut off the hose. It wasn't like Nebraska couldn't do anything. They had 300 plus yards, and I was looking back at it, Bruntz, they had a 10-play drive, a 12-play drive where you just don't get any points out of it. You had 2 other 8-play drives where you're in Penn State territory. I think we talked about it leading in. This was going to be the type of game where you're going to get those few opportunities where you move it down to like their 35-yard line and in. What are you going to do with it? Well, on one of the promising drives, it was not a great down and distance, but they had that delay of game where they snapped it into the official, and that pretty much killed that one. The game was already sort of out of hand, but on their first drive of the third quarter, you get that pre-snap penalty. I wonder if TJ maybe snapped it a little early and Dane Key didn't get a chance to get set. That took them from a 3rd and 4 that I think was going to work, because they did kind of run the play actually, and it looked like it would have got a first down, into a 3rd and 9. They end up not scoring, stuff like that. So it's not like you look at the game and you're like, oh, that was just completely miserable. They couldn't do anything back to earth with young TJ at quarterback. I think they can do stuff, but they've got to have a little bit more consistency and that finishing skill, which obviously was missing on the first drive, which sort of set the tone for everything. Not saying Nebraska would have won the thing or whatever, but if you punch in that first drive, it changes the juice on each sideline, and at least it's probably a more competitive game.
Yeah, it seemed like Nebraska was trying to get some early rhythm throws and some layups for TJ basically in the passing game. And I never felt like for most of the first quarter that he really settled into the game much. And I think part of that was, just Penn State's defense. I think part of that was, you have a nice drive, you don't get points on the first drive. Penn State turns around and just crams it right down your throat going the other way, and all of a sudden that game starts to feel a little bit different. So I don't know. We can look forward a little bit here, but I am kind of curious to see what the game plan is going to be for Iowa, because as you well know, Iowa can cover like crazy on the back end of that defense. And I am kind of curious to see how Nebraska chooses to use TJ Lateef and how they kind of settle him into a game, because it's going to be, you're kind of getting into the 300 levels of playing quarterback when you're going up against Iowa with the way they disguise things on the back end. And also just, they're just so steady. And you're not going to have kind of the bust that you had at times against UCLA.
Yeah, and that's where your defense also needs to help you out and keep you around and get a couple stops, and not keep you on the sideline for so long. And certainly that's part of it. But yeah, it's going to be a tough test for the offense. When you look at Iowa's defense when they started the season, they had weird reports coming out like in the summer and fall camp, like actually the offense might be better than the defense sort of stuff. And honestly, early in I know, but early in the year, like there was a little bit of that, at least on the defensive side. They didn't seem to have their feet under them like they normally do. And they've shifted it. They're top 10 again. Like they're number 8 in total defense, number 9 in yards per play. And so as much as it's easy to knock their style sort of sometimes, you cannot argue with what Phil Parker has done for decades with that defense. And every time they face Nebraska, that they're going to be pretty well oiled at that point and really play off each other well. And they're going to force turnovers. They can do it, though. They can make that play that's a backbreaker. So that's where you always have to be cognizant of that, I guess, that balance of let it rip, young fella, also with like, yeah, but let's call stuff that maybe gives him, 2 or 3 concepts that are easier maybe in the moment to dissect, whatever those plays may be. That's easy to say on a podcast 4 days before the game. much harder to do against that defense, which always, for the most part, holds Nebraska in check to a low scoring game, unless even that game, Trey Palmer got loose. They sort of, by the second half, settled in.
Yeah, it's still only 24 points, which feels like that's like 3 games worth, it feels like, in that series, the way it's gone. But we'll have plenty of Iowa conversation. We'll probably have a little bit more from Penn State throughout the week on the site as well. We'll hear from Matt Rule later today, players and coordinators on Tuesday, and then Matt Rule again on Wednesday before the Friday matchup with Iowa. Keep it locked on Husker 24/7 for everything this week leading up to the game with Iowa.